TNT must move 20 spots on Global Competitiveness Index. Mr. Brooks, the legal and the industrial relations climate in this country is one that's very heated. The labor movement, the joint trade union movement, was established as a political force. They embraced the People's Partnership government. The fallout is well documented. Now it seems that every attempt the government is making to increase productivity, they're clashing with the unions. The unions are saying they want the AG to go. They want the labor minister to go. They want better representation. They want higher wages. All of this while we're attempting to boost productivity and cut expenditure.
There is no doubt, Hema, that we in Trinidad and Tobago have to move away from an adversarial posture, which is not helpful, to more of a cooperative, constructive posture where labor, government, and the private sector work far more closely. There are a couple of things that need to be done, and there's some interesting data that's coming out. If you take a look at the data around unresolved disputes, you'd see that in 2009 it was 692, in 2010 it was 781, and 2011 there was 778 unresolved disputes. In 2012, you have 566 disputes. The number of retrenchments has also increased. But coming back to perhaps the fundamental point is that there is an adversarial posture. You have the problem at TCL,
right,
which impacted the economy in Q1 and Q2, and which would have impacted GDP, and which would have impacted very adversely the construction sector at a time when the construction sector is still trying to recover. You'd have had the rest and reflection of teachers, and one asks the question, why could we not have resolved that very early in the vacation, and why do students have to suffer coming out of it? A couple fundamental things need to be done. One is that we have to give some meaning to this tripartite arrangement. That's one. Two, I believe that the Industrial Relations Act cast in the 1970s needs to be revamped. It is out of sync and out of time. And you need to examine a couple of things inside of there. One is the recognition board and the whole business of decertification of unions, a touchy issue. Two, the industrial court is increasingly being clogged with cases which go before the court, and there's not the allocation of costs if the union or if an employee brings a frivolous matter. That, in my view, needs to be addressed. Thirdly, the business of strikes, where, for example, you have voters voting for a strike. It is not by secret ballot. It's still done openly, and there's the risk and fear of reprisals. So there's several aspects of the Industrial Relations Act that I think needs to be addressed.
You're attached to one of the country's the Caribbean's leading conglomerates. How has the industrial relations climate affected business, your business?
It has affected our business, and it has affected the cost of our business. When I export products or services to another territory to win market, people are interested in the quality of the item, they're interested in the price of the item, and they're also interested in the service that we provide. To the extent that you're dealing with 14 days of personal leave, 20 days of sick leave, a number of holidays, it drives up your cost, so that there's a real issue around productivity. We have tried productivity-linked incentives, but I think that there has to be far greater collaboration and far greater cooperation with the union in moving business forward. In advanced jurisdictions, one, they're running with less staff, and secondly, they're also running with positive peer pressure where you want to come out to work, and there's less of an absenteeism problem. So there's a problem of development of human capacity, and then how do we work conjointly to move the process forward?
Looking at the human resource capacity in Trinidad and Tobago, and GATE has been in existence for quite a while now. We're looking at the alignment, creating the labor force needed, looking at where we are, where we would like to go. We keep using this word alignment. Do you think that the government truly aligns the needs of the business community, the needs of the development plan with what is being produced at our tertiary level institutions?
I think that some work needs to be done around the education system at many different levels. In the case of GATE, we need to bring the freeness to an end. There should be a cost around GATE, and to the extent that people feel there have to be costs associated with that. You can't simply migrate from one program to a second program to a third program, because we remember here, we are at a time where revenues are tight, we are running a $7 billion deficit, and we cannot continue to run indefinitely a $7 billion deficit. So one, I think GATE needs to be reviewed and revamped. Two, from a country level, we need to say where do we need to be training resources and where do we need to be directing resources. So there are some areas which are priority areas. Let me give a couple examples. One, in terms of manufacturing, in the plastics and packaging industry, we need to train up people. In the area of glass formation, Carib Glass, in my own business, where we spend $100 million every 7 years to refreshen our furnaces and to compete, we need people with glass formation technology. So that in the technical area, in the engineering area, even in terms of marketing and export-led marketing, those are skills and areas that we need to build from a competence standpoint.
A competence standpoint. GATE is one of the programs, the social programs the government offers. CPEP, URP, subsidies, the gas subsidy, the expenditure profile that the government now maintains. How is the minister going to balance all of it? And we're not a country of making hard decisions. In fact, politics seems to dictate what decisions are made in this country.
We have to start making hard decisions, and those decisions have to be driven by, one, a philosophy of accountability, and secondly, it has to be driven by value. Perhaps we might start by asking the question, what state enterprises do we have which have not paid an annual dividend for the last 3 years, and make some decisions around those. Two, what is the size of government that we need to have? Across the region, I think notoriously our governments are way too large. We need to slim down government and rationalize costs. So those are two areas that I would offer as areas that we need to address almost immediately. So let me just stop there for the time being.
Deficit financing, and our budget is in deficit, about $7 billion. We're looking at, will 2012 deficit be higher than 2011? The minister did make it clear that we cannot return to a balanced budget in the immediate future. In fact, he's looking at 3 to 5 years, maybe even 8 years. Do you think enough is being done to ensure that we can actually see a balanced budget in the not too distant future?
I think that one of the things that the minister has to do is that he has to say very clearly, what is my 3-year plan? Because there is not a difficulty in running a deficit for another year or 2 or 3, unless, so what is my very specific plan in concrete, clear terms to get us out of this hole? How do I increase foreign direct investment? Right now, our foreign direct investment is averaging about 600 million. If you take a look at countries in our position, the Ecuadors and various other countries that were blessed with mineral wealth, they were actually able to extricate themselves from a deficit position, which they all went in 2008, by 2009, and latest 2010. Why is it that we continue to be in a deficit? What is the game plan to get out of the deficit? What is the role of the private sector? And how shall I use each sector specifically to do that? There are some opportunities. The manufacturing sector, the financial services sector, the distribution sector has grown. There are export opportunities, and there's diversification in the energy sector to create new footholds of growth. But we have to be very specific, very clear. Too frequently, we attempt to do too much. And when you go back and look at previous budgets, it's a plethora of things that we talked about, and very few get done. So let's narrow the focus, prioritize, and communicate very clearly with KPIs and metrics.
Mr. Brooks, who's investing in Trinidad and Tobago? A number of trade missions were conducted over the last day. Since the government came into power, they've been leading delegations throughout the world. Are people investing?
I think that there is still interest in Trinidad and Tobago because there are still many positives. One positive is we have 13.5 months of import cover. Our Heritage and Stabilization Fund at $4.2 billion is still robust. The macroeconomic fundamentals are not bad. You have relatively cheap credit. You have bright people. You have a very stable ICT framework. You have an educated workforce. You have a stable government. We have a legal and judicial system that works. So there are many positives, and there are still many competitive advantages to come into Trinidad and Tobago. One, our location. Two, the political system. Thirdly, an educated workforce, so that there is still an interest. What we have to do is that we have to de-bottleneck some of the things that make it difficult to do business. And I talked about the EMA, I talked about some of the ministries, and let me give you an example of one ministry, labeling and standards. We need to move the Chemistry and Food and Drugs Division. We need to align that somewhere between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Trade. You can't have the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Trade trying to deal with virtually the same matters. So the ease of doing business, the facilitation, re-engineering some of the ministries, I think is something which is available to us.
The gas subsidy. Your thoughts? It's been no secret that everyone is saying that we can no longer afford to maintain it at the level that it's being maintained. What can the government do?
My thoughts on the gas subsidy are, there is no doubt that you have got to relax the gas subsidy over time. There are a couple of issues around the gas subsidy. One is that if we're switching to CNG, we need to build out a much more quickly a network of CNG stations. We need to have high-speed pumps, and you need to have accessibility. That's number one. Number two, if you touch the gas subsidy and you affect it too dramatically, you're going to increase transportation costs and distribution costs across the country. So that's going to have an inflationary impact and a cost to people. So CNG, one, the stations. Two, you have to have a sensible conversation with large manufacturers who are running fleets of vehicles to say, here's how we're going to build CNG stations on your network. Thirdly, the leakage. A significant part of the subsidy is going to leakage, which is leaking because people are coming, buying fuel, and still transporting it outside. I think that the minister spoke about a $96 million bill there.
Right.
It perhaps is many times the order of that, so that we've got to reduce that order of leakage. So several things. One, the CNG network. Two, government has got to outfit its own vehicles, buses, and all of the public utility vehicles with the appropriate kits, retrofitted so that you lead by example. Fourthly, the high-speed pumps. And then fifthly, a graduated mechanism to come off it.
2.5 years on, this is the partnership's midterm mark, really. Do you think the economy is any better? Do you think Trinidad and Tobago has achieved economic transformation, the type promised in the manifesto of 2010?
Hema, I think it's less what I think and what the numbers are. If you take a look at 2010, negative growth, 2011, negative growth, 2012, forecast at best to be 1%, and you compare us to countries which are similarly blessed, Colombia, Colombia is a much bigger country, but many other countries which are in a similar position, they have all returned to 3%, 4%, and 5% growth. Trinidad and Tobago, if we're to realize the level of job creation and the aspirations of our population, have to get out of 1%. So the simple answer is no. This is a defining moment. This is a transformative moment. And we have to look at 3 to 5 years out and speak very courageously to what is expected of each of us as we move forward, sector by sector, business by business, private sector, public sector, and the NGO sector. There's an important role for the NGO sector in the budget as it relates to crime, as it relates to youth unemployment, as it relates to driving and empowering our communities. So the simple answer is no, but we have that opportunity now. We have some fiscal space. We must seize the moment.
Mr. Brooks, before we wrap this interview, your closing comments to Trinidad and Tobago.
My closing comments to Trinidad and Tobago and to the minister would be, there is a lot of support for the minister. There's a lot of respect for the minister. He must use the budget to drive accountability. He must use the budget to speak in terms of a 3 to 5 year plan. He must speak in terms of specifics. And he must focus on growth and do some transformative things.